week is what they're trying to say. You are most welcome to
Yes.
Good afternoon and welcome to our town council meeting. We are going to go into executive session shortly, but first I'll call the meeting to order and ask Pam to please call the roll.
Absolutely. Let us begin with David Knight,
Here.
Dieter Schindler,
Here.
Angela Anderson,
Here.
Hannah Berman,
Here.
Rick Stevens, Ryan Slack. Okay, we have a quorum, sir.
All right. I would entertain a motion to enter executive session.
Angèle Dupré-Bouchard. I am sorry, Angèle Dupré-Bouchard.
I am present.
My math is bad. Thank you so much, Angèle. Okay, we have more than a quorum. We are good to go.
Great. Entertain a motion to go into executive session.
Mayor, I move that the town council enter executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters in accordance with CRS 24-6-4024F and for the purpose of determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and/or instructing negotiations pursuant to CRS 24-6-402E, more specifically, for review of town manager applicants.
Is there a second? All right. You got that, Pam?
Yeah, I got several on that, so that's good. Thank you.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, so we are going to go into executive session. We're planning on being back here at about 6 o'clock, so we'll see everybody then.
to say anything, just checking or testing or whatever you want.
Testing, testing, checking, checking, testing the sound. Hope these sound good. Testing, testing. Testing, testing. Hello, hello. Testing, testing. Check, check. Microphone check. Still testing.
Thank you, Michelle.
You're welcome.
Welcome back to our, what day is today? July 8th, July 8th Town Council meeting. We were in exec session earlier, so I'll call the meeting back to order, the regular meeting, and Pam, will you please call the roll?
Happily. Let's begin with David Knight,
Here.
Peter Schindler,
Here.
Angela Anderson,
Here.
Rick Stevens,
Here.
Hannah Berman. Oh, she wasn't going to join us here for that part. Angèle Dupré-Bouchard
Here.
and Ryan Slack.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have item number 2, our consent agenda, which is just consists of item 2A, the minutes from June 24th, 2025. I entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Mayor, I move that the town council approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have item number 3, which is our call to the public. So just the ground rules, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Address your comments directly to me. Identify yourself by name and address when making comments. Comments should be courteous, civil, and constructive, and town council will make no decision or take action except to direct the interim town manager. And it looks like we don't have any public hearings, so anything goes. Any topics? We have anybody, we don't have anybody in the room though, and
Under the attendees, no.
no one online either. All right, so I will close the call to the public. Next up, we have item number 4, mayor and council reports and comments.
I just wanted to shout out and thanks to Brent Compton and the rest of the staff for another amazing River Jams Festival on Saturday. I was there for most of the day, as per usual, and had a blast. The entertainment was great. It was, hot and sunny, and kids were jumping in the river. It was all the things you want it to be. So thanks. It seemed like the community really loved it. And I know it was a lot of work, but I think well worth it.
Thank you.
I was going to second that. I thought it was awesome. And just kudos to staff for putting on a great event. And then also to the pool. The pool had another late night pool session. Huge turnout. Awesome to see. Love just seeing all these great community events being organized that are assets that we've been working on for years. So it's really fun to see the programming come to fruition and all the dreams we had thought. And so kudos to all of staff for busting their butts to get it done.
I also want to add, now that we're kind of in the full swing of summer, I've had the opportunity to really walk into town a couple times and walk up and down Midland, and it just makes me smile so big. I think it is so beautiful, and it looks so amazing, and it looks, the ease of access and everything that we hoped it would be. So kudos to Catherine and Michelle and everybody for that too. The landscaping looks great. It really is so neat to see it all come together.
Also adding the thank you for the quiet opening of our new putt-putt course. My child loved it, had a blast. I can't wait to go play it. So just once again, just executing on all the stuff we've been talking about. So thank you to staff for continuing to make Basalt thrive. It's awesome.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I would just like to pass along a little information on the Early Childhood Education Coalition efforts to get a ballot question on the November ballot, which is going to go forward, I guess, to raise sales tax revenues from sales tax from Parachute to Aspen. They're starting to pull together members of the community to be educated on how to get a campaign launched and positive votes for their efforts. So that's Thursday night. There's the first training session in Glenwood, I guess, for people that are interested. But it's, I'm not sure if I've got this right, but it's a district that'll be created from Aspen to Parachute. We're in District 4, I think, or part of it is Zone 4. And right now, we apparently don't have anybody that's stepping up to be a commissioner from this area. So if there's anybody out there that's really passionate about early childhood education and the opportunity to get this ballot question on the ballot and then serve on the board, get in touch with the Aspen Foundation, Community Foundation, because they're taking the lead on that. The other thing is Jim Light and I have been talking about reigniting Basalt Area Gives in light of the mobile home park purchases, and I think we're getting pretty serious about working with some community members and Rowing Fork Club and South Chamber. So you'll see some of that coming out here, and the news I've gotten so far is 11.5 million's been raised. He thinks he's got another few, and then there's a deficit of maybe a couple million to get to this $15 million goal. And the important piece of this is the community support for the purchase of the parks. And Carbondale put a challenge out to us elected officials in Basalt to do more. And so Jim and I talked about that a little bit. We're going to take the community approach, and let's see if the community will do more, businesses and whoever else, philanthropy that's out there, and just say to Carbondale, we're ready to go. Let's go see if you can raise some more money. The idea to get the support beyond just funding is to convince the state to fund that last $5 million of the $20 million that's needed to complete the purchase offer. And it would be contingent on whether or not the owner of the park actually accepts the mobile home park's offer. So if it doesn't go through, that you're not committed, but you're making a commitment to the opportunity at least. So that's clear, and it's kind of,
Yeah.
it's a very complicated deal, so we're going to be out there. Yeah,
Thanks, Rick.
sure.
Anyone else? Only comment I have is a thank you, and I'm not sure who's responsible exactly, but the tennis courts by the middle school, the big cracks are fixed.
I can tell you who did that.
Who did that?
Matt
Okay.
from Basalt Rec.
Okay. Yeah.
So
That's
that
great.
was in town through our
Several
IGA.
days. Yeah, so that was nice. There's people already out there playing league, practicing, because those courts get a lot of use, and I know people were afraid they're gonna lose a foot in there, and because the cracks were just getting big, but they look great. So thank you for doing that. All right, next up we have our interim manager's report. Doug.
I have nothing to report.
Nothing to report, all right. We can move on to item 6A, which is our first presentation on long-term funding for affordable housing with Michelle and James.
All right. Well, this is hopefully a brief presentation of possible long-term funding strategies for affordable housing for your consideration. Let my friend James skip, yep. For context, we're discussing long-term funding options that are based on the key strategies from our housing needs assessment update, which was completed in 2024 by EPS. Design Workshop and the EPS team have been supporting the town in implementing some of the strategies outlined in the housing needs report. These include broadening the town's income categories, developing a deed restriction incentive program. We're currently working in the background on an ADU incentive program, and incentivizing and working on recalculating our mitigation rates for private development. So these are all actions going on in the background, but we're going to focus the rest of this on funding options. I'm faster than James, that's fun.
Computer's frozen.
Because the next one is my key slide, which is that new programs and developments require funding to implement. And what you may or may not know is that most of our deed-restricted housing in Basalt was created from free market mitigation. And mitigation, as the only producer of housing in town, is not meeting the demand. So it's critical that we find another funding source to move forward with preserving existing housing, building new developments, and financing any of the programs we're interested in. Our peer communities have adopted some long-term funding measures. And without going through all of these items here, but from Snowmass to Telluride, Vale, Winter Park, there's not a silver bullet, and that's the point of this slide. The measures have gone from sales tax, property tax, lodging tax, and regulatory fees. It's key, it's a different strategy for each community, and that's the main takeaway. So finding the right fit for Basalt will be important. So the EPS study identified 4 possible funding strategies. You were recently adopted the STR regulatory fee strategy, so we won't talk about that tonight. But we will go over briefly sales tax as an option, property tax, and lodging tax. So this slide summarizes the EPS memo that's in the packet. From left to right are the most revenue generating to the least revenue generating over a 10-year projection that's been created by EPS. And it's important to note that the ranges of the revenue is based on a range of the amount of new tax that would be levied in each category. So for example, in sales tax, the option is to adopt 0.25% all the way up to 1%. The range for that range of new tax would be 8.7 to potentially 35 million over 10 years. And so that kind of goes down to property tax, that 10-year projection, 3.4 million to 6.7, lodging tax, 384,000 to 3 million, and then of course our regulatory fee. So a couple of slides on each one. First, we'll just go from most to least. There's not necessarily a direction in these. Sales tax potentially generates the most revenue, 8.7 to 35 million over 10 years. Basalt's existing sales tax is really average with our neighbors. Basalt in Eagle County, we're at 8.2%. Basalt in Picken County, 9.3%. It's comparable existing. Aspen is 8.3 and Glenwood 9.1. I was surprised to learn, you might be too, Carbondale is at almost 12% sales tax, so there's some space in there. EPS has generated this nice table on the right. What does a sales tax increase look like on your grocery bill? And if you were to go the full Monty of a 1% increase on a $100 grocery bill, that would be $1. So it just gives you a little bit of reference of what it means to increase these taxes for consumers. The next slide is property tax. Property tax is the second greatest revenue generating source over 10 years, getting $3.4 to $6.7 million. So EPS has found that the median home value, this is tough, is $2.6 million in Basalt. Levying one additional mill would increase property taxes $356 over a year. However, we know that escalating home values over recent years have really impacted seniors and long-term residents who maybe didn't ever want to have a $2.6 million home or related property bill, so that's a concern. And then last is lodging tax. The existing lodging tax rates in our valley, Aspen is the lowest at 10.3%. Basalt in Eagle County, we're at 12.2%. Basalt in Picken County, 13.3%. Carbondale, 13.9%, and Glenwood at 14.1%. So we're in the mid and lower range in lodging tax revenue, or lodging taxes. A 2% increase in lodging tax over 10 years could potentially bring in about $3 million. As we know, additional lodging tax is outsourced to residents, from residents to visitors, but it is worth noting that in Basalt we do have a newer hotel that's just outside of town limits with a lower lodging tax on it. So there is some competition that's potentially tough for our existing lodges to compete with. And I said it was short and sweet, and that's what it is. Happy to take questions.
Do you know how many of our businesses are in Eagle County versus Pitkin County?
I'd say most of them are even.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I would assume, just judging by where the county line is. And I think that's an important thing to consider when you're looking at these comparable numbers, because it's easy to look at the Pitkin County part of Basalt and say, oh, well, that's already kind of high, but it's not entirely applicable because most of our businesses, including lodging, are in Eagle County.
Yes.
You know, that, you know, at least in my judgment, gives us some wiggle room and, you know, a little bit, maybe more voter appetite to add. I personally, you know, would want to stay away from property tax, just because I think that property taxes are going to keep increasing just by virtue of property values increasing over the next couple of years, and people are already strapped there. Whereas sales tax is, you know, a little bit more piecemeal, smaller, a little bit easier to digest, and everyone participates in that, visitors and locals, as well as lodging tax. So what I would like to see is a little bit of sales tax, a little bit of lodging tax, and again, you know, making sure that we're more focusing on that Eagle County number because I think it's skewed.
Thank you. Yeah, I think for affordable housing specifically, the lodging tax seems like a good option to go with. I have a little bit of hesitancy with the sales tax. I don't like the property tax idea now, but the sales tax, I want to be cognizant of that we're going to have other capital projects like the Police and Public Works Center as a priority, and we're going to have to raise money there. So I want to make sure and I think everybody knows this, we've talked about it, but think about it holistically, what those revenue sources are going to be. And then also make sure that we have, you know, programs that tie to on the affordable housing side, you know, vis-a-vis the, you know, deed buy downs and things like that. Our projects are out there rugby adjacent, and that's going to take some money and partnerships and some combination, right? So I want to make sure we're looking at the big picture on that. But I feel like the lodging tax is probably, at least for a lot of the outside of those kind of builds, like for deed buy downs, makes a lot of sense, along with the short-term rental fee.
Yeah, we tried to maintain a little bit of headroom with the sales tax too, so we didn't get to that limit.
Yeah.
As I understood it years ago, was Pitkin was using up all their sales tax monies, or had reached their limit. Basalt still had some room to grow their sales tax opportunity. And Eagle, since we're all in Eagle, most of us, it was a little tricky to navigate that between Eagle and Pitkin and not bump up against Pitkin's amount versus Eagle County. So
Yeah.
we sort of split it at some point in time. So we still had that headroom you're talking about for projects coming down the road. And then you know, one of the things that's come out of these conversations with other people is, you know, our relationship with public-private partnerships is public and NGOs right now, with the waterfall that's been created and the priorities for housing. And I think looking at the opportunities for partnering with more businesses that are, you know, for profit, and whoever they might be, is still a good place to look for funding, especially there are people that think there's philanthropy to a point here in the Mid-Valley that could benefit Basalt's housing programs and the Mid-Valley's housing programs. I just think that should be investigated a little bit more, however it's structured, whether it's land trusts or foundations or just pure investment. These mobile home parks are an interesting thing to look at, and you know, I talked to somebody today has a partner in it that's got 11 of these mobile home parks, and I never understood really that the magnitude of these mobile home park LLC entities is huge, and you know, to push back on those guys is going to take a lot of, again, you know, the community effort to make it happen. But I want to look at everything. just look at it all, you know, restricted funds, sales tax, property tax, we just appealed on a personal level. And they reduced it by 20%, so don't give up. The 2.6 is the average on my street for a small house, and everybody's pushing back on that, because obviously it was ridiculous. And the other thing I noticed over the last 3 years, the property taxes have gone up like 30% per year, versus before COVID, they were going up about 10 or 12%. So there's something else connected to that other than home value, and I'm not sure what it is, but they responded pretty quickly to our request for reduction, which I was surprised at. So I think it's worth a deep dive into this, especially to the point you made of Public Works and police.
Anyone else?
No, I agree. I think people are completely upset on property tax. I don't think that's a great route. The other two are the best options, but we have to keep some powder dry for other projects too. So we can't, as much as we want to lend the helping hand and push our thumb on affordable housing, I think we're making great strides, and so don't need to burden our citizens with more taxes just to house other people.
Got it. Great. That's helpful direction.
You got the direction you needed.
I guess I need to ask though, I mean, if we're interested in pursuing either a lodging tax or a sales tax increase this year, we'd have to go to the voters to get voter approval under Tabor, and you can only have Tabor elections at the fall election or your regular municipal election. Typically, you'll do that in a fall election, so it can be part of a coordinated election with the county to keep costs down and to increase voter turnout. And so to participate in the election, you need to take action by basically the end of the month to provide notice to participate. And I think the plan and intent was to be prepared to do that at our next meeting. I think the real question is it the direction of council to pursue a sales tax and a lodging tax increase, or one or the other? And Michelle, I don't know how specific a direction you're looking for this evening.
I think that we can, I mean, ideally, if there was a single direction, that would be great, but I think we can come back with two options.
What's in flight with Bill Ray right now as far as what he's going to survey on? I know we talked about lodging tax.
Yeah, we have signed our agreement with this firm to help us formulate outreach to the public on a lodging tax initiative. And what's currently contemplated is just headlines is that we're currently raising about $500,000, at least that's the budget for 2025, of lodging taxes. 125 of that goes to the chamber, 125,000 goes to maintaining our parks, and another, say, 250 is for our events, concert series, along with all the other events throughout the year. So what's contemplated now is a 2%, or the talking point would be if we went from 4 to 6% of a lodging tax. That 2% would give us potentially $250,000 in additional revenue. And with that, then we would have specific purposes. Deed buy downs, it could be a secure funding source for financing. It could be mortgage assistance. There's several different ways we can influence affordable housing with that constant stream of revenue. So the path we're on is that we'd have this resolution that Jeff just mentioned at the next meeting. And that we would have an ordinance being prepared that would have more of the particulars about what the ballot increase would be. By that time, we would have a survey done, and we don't necessarily, even by filing the resolution, it's not a one-way door. We can still don't necessarily have to proceed with it. And we can get the feedback from the public and the survey results from Bill's firm, And then we would have ordinance reading, and we'd hear from the public, and then we would go through the path of the taper compliance with the election, pairing pros and cons and meeting certain deadlines. So that's the path we're on right now.
Yeah, so it doesn't include the sales
Does
tax.
not include
surveying
sales
and-
tax. I think you had mentioned that there's competing, there's a number of mouths to feed, and that the Public Works Police Department, there's two paths we go down. One is that the presentation that was done last year, I think it had a price tag of something like $28 million, or something like that. Town cannot afford doesn't have the reserves or the borrowing capacity to fund a $28 million project. So it's possible if we had a sales tax increase that could fill the gap, and that we'd have capital stacks that could actually then meet the $28 million number. Now, just because you go out with a sales tax increase doesn't mean you're going to get it. So Plan B would be, well, if you're not going to get a sales tax increase, your borrowing capacity is X amount of dollars, and we only have so much in the bank, then you're going to have Plan B, which would be less of a facility. We've already started our discussions with Aaron, the police department, along with Justin, with Justin now with his first 100 days. He has perhaps a different perspective than the former Public Works Director, so they're reformulating kind of what their real needs are, may be different than what was initially contemplated, and coming up with two different paths. One that what we could afford, and one that what we could afford if we had a sales tax increase. So that's kind of where we're at right now. And what we are seeking to do in August, I think it's August, second week, is to have a work session presenting both plans and how we see it rolling out. But the sales tax increases, in my mind, what works to be exhausted would be for the police works, public works, because that was really the highest priority coming out of the retreat. So I think we should exhaust that before we have that go to lodging. That would be my recommendation, or not lodging, but for affordable housing. That would be my recommendation.
I agree.
I agree.
I can see staying on the path for affordable housing and for the lodging tax, but I don't know trying to get a sales tax ballot initiative by November is palatable to at least me.
No, I feel like we try and do a lodging tax rate this November dedicated to affordable housing, because then we have the short-term rental fee and this increased lodging tax percentage combined that will either serve to help with deed buy-downs or mortgage assistance, or, like we said, a dedicated source of funding for debt service. And then we really, put pencil to paper, and then next November go for sales tax for police and public works.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's too big a lift this year also to do a sales tax
You're competing against
question. Yeah.
Competing
the
against yourself.
childcare too.
Yeah, it's just-
Childcare
it's not the
tax,
right
which is
time.
Already spearheaded, so then you're gonna have, everyone's has their hand out.
Yeah.
That would also give us time to really vet the Public Works and PD
Right, and
project.
Exactly.
give the departments time to do what Doug was saying, go through that exercise of, needs versus wants, and really get down to brass tacks on what we need.
Yeah.
And then educate, have more of a, more
Public outreach.
discussion, public, about really the needs. I mean, if you look at the police department right now, it's really not that great of a facility. And I guarantee you the Public Works is just the same way. I mean, it's actually worse.
And I think
And
that's
they
going to be
do over half the services in the town.
a big lift, that public outreach, to
Yeah.
really make sure the public understands why this is so important for our community.
Right.
It's really important, and we want to have adequate time to
Yeah.
convey
To do
the
it.
message and make people understand, and give Justin and others a chance to, figure out what their needs are, so. So I think,
I think that clarified it for me. I just want to make sure it wasn't council's direction to pursue either or both, but we'll keep marching down the path of an election related to a lodging tax increase.
Just a general question. What is the cost of a coordinated general election versus the cost of a municipal election next April? What is the difference there in terms of cost? Is it hundreds of thousands of dollars, or,
I have to ask Pam, but we could
I mean, is
figure, we'd have to, yeah.
a third, and what is the total cost of, like a spring counselor, 3 counselor seats in the spring with a couple of initiatives like sales tax? That's on us, right?
We could do it in the spring, but yes, that would probably triple our costs from November, the
So
November election,
what's a November election?
generally around $3,000.
So it'd be 9
3
to
to
10
5.
grand to just do a general, or a simple town election for councils is 10 grand?
It
So
could
we
be,
don't coordinate those elections with the general elections in November.
correct.
Yeah, why don't we do
So can we add an item like sales tax and still pay 10 grand? Is that,
We could in April.
so
That
that's
might be
my
a little
question is,
soon
you know,
for-
it's $6,000 difference between
I'd
cost
say-
of a general election and the cost of a municipal regular election in the spring.
Could be more, because the ballot, it
more.
gets more complex with, you know, having to meet all the Tabor compliant requirements, the length of the ballot, you know.
On the
pro-con
town
statements and
town
so-
side?
Yeah, yeah,
Correct.
so
Yes.
instead of just the
But-
municipal candidates. But there's also, just from a turnout standpoint, you know, when you're in a coordinated election, you get much higher turnout than just the local municipal election.
But but it's also a fruit salad of issues to vote on versus a simple, straightforward municipal election for 3 seats and a couple of questions on sales tax and where it goes.
Yeah.
And, you know,
But on the heels.
that's just my point of view on it, especially to the education part. Because there's a lot of, out there in the breeze on the general side. But, you know, I just was curious. if
Well, we did
6
talk to
grand-
Bill about what, Bill Ray, that what would be optimal for the town in his opinion. And he was favoring, if we did a sales tax, November election for the turnout. That was his view, not, it wasn't like 3,000 versus 9,000 was the pro.
No, I was
pro-con,
just
but,
curious.
right.
I
I think the turnouts, and then having the ability to actually have the outreach in a very concerted way. I mean, you know, you guys just met today about who the next town manager is going to be. We don't know when that person's going to be, and is that the first thing up for that person? You know, I don't know if that's going to be the best interest.
So anything we do with Ray at this point, though, which we signed a contract for some amount of money,
I did.
yeah. If for whatever reason we don't come to a conclusion on, and we think the ballot's gonna not pass, we're not out any of that investment that we've made if it gets pushed to a later date and combined with some other question. I'm just throwing out a scenario here because I don't know what the ballot question's gonna ask for, what it's gonna say, who's gonna respond to it, and how it's gonna go over in the community quite yet. So I just, you know, we're making an investment into 2 significant questions for the voters to respond to on housing and on facilities for the public general good, right? Safety and welfare. Those to me are 2 linchpins to the whole strategy of the plan that we've got in front of us, is implementation. If it gets split in November and April, we're still making the same investment in either case,
Okay.
right? Time-wise, staff-wise, Ray-wise, legal-wise.
There's some equivalencies, but I mean, my couple things. One, for the sales tax, we got dependencies that we got to figure out before we even start
yeah.
talking about how, you know, kind of order of operations. But you know, personally, in general, I would say that I'd rather decide a tax question with greater turnout. You know what I mean? Like if we know we're going to have greater turnout, greater participation. But, you know, we can cross those bridges when we get there, when we're in a position to with Public Works in particular for sales tax.
Did they start the outreach soon?
Yes.
Take a
Yeah, I think,
question and
I
ask.
think what we're
survey.
looking at trying to get this in motion by the 15th of July, which is
Okay.
next week.
Yeah. See what we get. Any other questions or comments for Michelle or James?
I just wonder, will we be talking about the ADU stuff later in the year then?
Yes, yeah.
just know
We-
it's been on
because-
all our slides, and it just seems to be the one that gets kind of punted down the hill.
Yeah, this particular item has this deadline if we're going to go to the election, so we scooched the ADU,
All good.
but it'll come back.
Thank you.
All right, that's all, I think that's it.
Yep.
We will move on, thank you both. And we'll move on to item 6B, which is our Anchor Ice water flow donation presentation. Catherine and Heather Lewin and Ryan Jarvis. You guys come on up to the table.
I'll let these guys take the hot seat and I'll just introduce them.
Just pull a chair up.
Yeah, grab a chair.
And we you got the mics and everything, it'll be,
I think most of you probably know Heather Lewin that works for the Roaring Fork Conservancy. Ramsey Croft, she's an attorney helping the Conservancy navigate this ask. And then, of course, we have Ryan Jarvis, the town's water attorney, with us as well to help you all answer any questions you guys have. But I'll let Heather and Ramsey take away their presentation.
Sure thing. We had. So thank you all for taking a few minutes today. We're here to talk a little bit about Rudai Reservoir and some potential contract water that we could lease out of Rudai that the town owns to benefit environmental flows, particularly in the wintertime. Michelle, are you in control of this?
It's James, but he'll. Yes.
So a lot of these slides, if you got them in your packets, have a whole lot of information on them. I'm going to kind of talk at a high level. It'll give you the opportunity to go back, and then we're right down the road if any additional questions ever come up. But Rudai Reservoir, we think of here as a recreational amenity, but really Rudai was built as West Slope compensation for the Frying Pan, Arkansas project that transports water, right, from our headwaters over to the Front Range. And so all the water that's in Rudai Reservoir now is their specific use. It's got an owner, it's got a target, and it's got a beneficial use that's associated with all that water. So while, from our perspective, it's a lot of recreation and fun, there's really a lot more to it. When you dig in, if you had the time or the energy, this article by Brent Gardner-Smith a few years back really digs into who owns the water, how it's all used, and how it works. Go ahead, James, thank you. So here we are in the middle of the summer and some of the hottest days we've had, and we're going to talk to you about the winter. So we'll show you some nice photos of the Frying Pan River in the middle of the winter. You can get your inner snow wishes back. But if you go through the Frying Pan in the middle of the winter, whether you're walking down downtown Basalt, over the bridge where the Frying Pan crosses Two Rivers Road, you can see two things going on: surface ice, which is the ice at the top, and anchor ice. Anchor ice is ice that forms on the bottom of the river. It's super cooled water that attaches to rocks or other substrate on the bottom of the river. And so there are some environmental flow considerations we want to talk about that might help mitigate some of this anchor ice to benefit ecological flows in the Frying Pan. Go ahead. So flows on the Frying Pan in the wintertime are managed by the Bureau of Reclamation. They're managed at 39 CFS, which is the Colorado Water Conservation Board's minimum in-stream flow, so basically the lowest ecological number that they found to keep water moving through the river. They can manage at 39 CFS or inflow, whichever is less. They generally will manage 39 CFS. If you see 39 CFS in the Frying Pan, it's a pretty low number. It's not a whole lot of water moving through. And so the concerns that happen basically are you've got increased anchor ice formation because you have less water to mitigate between temperature of the air. So we'll talk a little bit about a few studies that we've done that have found that really the ecological goal to benefit the best health of the Frying Pan is to have closer to 60 to 70 CFS, so cubic feet per second flowing through there. So almost twice of what the that minimum flow is. Go ahead. So just quickly, the concerns around anchor ice impacts. I'm sure a lot of you are anglers or have tried your hand at angling just by living here or have seen or heard a bit about it. So when you're out there fishing and you tie a fly onto your rod, right, you're mimicking those aquatic insects. Those aquatic insects spend most of their life at the bottom of the river, and they live in the spaces between the rocks. If you go almost anywhere on the Roaring Fork of the Frying Pan and flip a rock over, you're going to find bugs underneath it. So in the wintertime, when this anchor ice forms, you're taking up not only the space that those insects would live in, but when that ice releases, you're scouring the homes as well. And so you can see some impacts to the aquatic life, right? So if you're impacting the bugs, you're impacting the fish, you're impacting pretty much everything else around that ecosystem. So go ahead to the next slide. So basically what we've found through a couple studies is that the biggest impact to that anchor ice formation is the flow. So you've got three things kind of working: the air temperature, the water temperature, and the flow that impact that ice formation. And the one thing that is manageable of those is the flow. Really can't control too much the air temperature or the water temperature. So basically what we've seen in these studies, and they are a few years old now, but what they found is that if we can keep the flows closer to 70 CFS, we see less anchor ice formation, less anchor ice persistence, so you have less of that scouring, and then also quicker recovery of the aquatic life and macroinvertebrate communities in the long term if you can keep those flows higher. Go ahead to the next slide. So what we've done over the past few years is worked with the Bureau of Reclamation, as well as the Colorado Water Conservation Board, the CWCB, and the River District to do our best to maintain those flows at 60 to 70 CFS. And so the Bureau of Reclamation, the BOR, has been a really good partner, and when they have enough water in the reservoir at the end of the summer, they will manage for environmental flows, which has been a huge benefit for us and for the community. When they don't have that water readily available, we've been working with the River District to lease water. The River District has the only contract that specifies winter environmental flows as a use in their contract. So 2019, 2021, 2022, 2023, we were able to lease water. You can see that kind of dotted line is that 60 CFS line. For the most part, during the winter, the flows will stay above that line. In the shoulder seasons, they'll still drop lower. You have less chance of ice formation when the weather's not as cold. Go ahead to the next slide. So starting in the winter of 2020-2021, Roaring Fork Conservancy has sent our water quality staff out twice a week from about late November through early March, when conditions are showing favorable for anchor ice formation. So when you've got temperatures that are at or below freezing for at least 1 or 2 nights in a row, they actually monitor 7 different sites, starting in town all the way up to the dam, for anchor ice presence and absence. And so the idea is to really better understand through it's going to take a few more years of data to really get a better sense of how that flow plus air temperature plus water temperature really impacts how much ice we're seeing and when and where. So this helps us really justify and understand that the water that we're leasing and we're spending this money on is doing what we think it's supposed to do. Go ahead to the next slide. So the concern now has been going into a year like this when we suspect we're going to have lower reservoir levels, needs further downstream. Most of those contract needs are for areas more in Grand Junction. There are local uses. Basalt holds some water, as do a few other places, for augmentation. So when they use water out of turn, they pull water out of the reservoir for somebody further downstream. But this year we suspect that we're going to have reservoir levels low enough that we're going to be looking to lease water again this winter. And so as you can see, with not just the numbers, but the costs are relatively high. We think the economic and the ecological benefits justify the costs. We've worked with the CWCB in the past, and they've funded these leases. Up until 2023, the CWCB fully funded those winter leases. They paid that money to the River District, who held the water. In 2023, some board members on the CWCB thought that if this water was really so important to us and our community, that we should be putting more money and more effort into it. And so Roaring Fork Conservancy and our team did a pretty big fundraising effort. We were able to raise about half the money that was needed for those leases in 2023. That seemed to satisfy what the board was looking for, and they put in the rest. So we're able to lease water that year. We haven't needed water, 2024, 2025. Both those winters, those were both run or managed with ecological flows. However, looking forward now, we suspect we're going to need water next year. And we knew when we went and kind of asked local entities that it wasn't probably a sustainable funding source. It wasn't something where we were going to get money year after year after year to all these different places, from all these different places, to be able to put in that contribution. And so where we landed was the idea that we could look at the contract water that's in Root Eye Reservoir, knowing that not all entities use all the water that their contract holds. And so we could look, instead of, you can go ahead to the next slide, instead of looking to raise money around this cause, we could look to contribute water around this cause. And so the town of Basalt kind of rose to the top as a potential example or use for this because of the fact they gave us about, I think they gave $10,000 last time. So the impacts ecologically and economically hit Basalt directly. We've got that anchorized monitoring site right in the town of Basalt, which allows us to, even though that ecological use isn't directly listed in their contract, in your contract, to, we believe, work with the Bureau of Reclamation to allow that water to be released from the town through the wintertime. The town doesn't hold enough water to fully satisfy. Its 3,500 acre feet is a fairly firm number, just to meet that gap and that need for the time frame that we're looking at. The town of Basalt, we think, could maybe lease up to, what did we say?
Up to 300.
300 acre feet that's regularly not used by the town, to be able to contribute that through the course of the winter. We realize it's sort of a smaller piece, but the demonstration that it would show that we're able to use that contract in that way, which hasn't really been done before, is a great bit of leadership by the town. It'd be a great partnership, and it would help us sort of towards that monetary contribution to start to add water to the pot rather than dollars to the pot. So we're hoping that the town would be interested in partnering in this pilot lease to donate some water through the course of the winter. Going forward, it would be something that it does not put your contract water at jeopardy. It wouldn't be water that you're using. Hopefully it wouldn't put you in a situation of any kind of trade-off of water. It'd be water that's not getting used through the course of the summer. When you would normally use that contract water, it'd be water that you had available.
And Ramsey Krupp, I'm the attorney for Heather here today, and the thing is, the town owns contract water with reclamation. You pay an OM&R for it, you own it, you get it every year, but if you're not using it, it just sits up there, and you can't bank it. You can't use it next year. So it's just sort of a lost resource that way. So we're hoping there's a way to, partner with the Conservancy, see if we can work with CWCB and Reclamation to make it happen. We have talked to both Reclamation and CWCB to move this forward, and been working with Ryan on what a contract looks like so that the town's water is fully protected, so that if your water needs do increase, you control what a lease might be over time, so that you never erode what you need to have available for your water department. So.
I appreciate you guys bringing this to us. This has been a good program. I know Jeff and I sit on the Conservancy board, and it's a really positive thing to do for the health of the rivers, but recognizing the cost, we got to figure out something to make it sustainable. I know I was looking through all the packet materials, and I saw, Rick and the councils back in the late 90s had the foresight to scoop up this contract water. And I know from past conversations, we don't use it all. I don't have the exact figures. So I'd be interested in pursuing this as kind of like, I guess it would be like an in-kind donation of water. And I know we can do it because our contract stipulates that if we're releasing it for in-stream benefit in these certain areas on the river, then we're good to go. Would other municipalities be able to make that argument for other areas, and at the same time, all that water would just flow through? And you're thinking that and/or a combination of cash donations as well? Like, how are you picturing that all coming together?
I think it'll probably be a combination to start with, but in particular, it seemed like from discussions with the division engineer, that downstream users, downstream of the confluence of the Frying Pan and the Roaring Fork River are, it could be possible to do that because they may need flows or seek flows in their own area downstream.
Yeah.
The division engineer was saying it was trickier for somebody like Aspen to let some of its contract water go because their own legal plans kind of cover them up there. So this way the water flows through the town boundaries. We've got a gauging station in the town. You've got residents of the town who make a living in the fishing world and rely on that. So it's a pretty easy one for the reclamation to do. And it keeps flowing down, right? Like,
Yeah.
so that's, you know, if we spoke to the town of Carbondale, who's told me, we could be interested in talking about this because they're thinking of some ways to look at more water conservation and water things down there, then the water that they may call down to use in their service area during periods of time would benefit the anchor ice just because it's got to flow by.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so maybe I'll chime in here. You know, the way this is structured, it really is, I would say, no risk to the town, right? So if you recall our talk from, I think, last fall or something, we talked about our water system. We have 500 acre feet. Exact numbers, we don't use anything remotely close to it. So I checked with our private water rights consultant that represents the town. 21 acre feet in 2022, 12 acre feet in 23, and 9 in 24. So we do expect that number, because recall we have these things called dry up credits that we rely on largely for our augmentation plan, and our root eye water is kind of a backup, right? If our dry up credits don't meet what we need, we can release water from root eye. But even we've used a pretty small amount. We do expect that number to maybe go up a little bit for a couple of reasons, but it's hard to imagine getting anywhere close to, you know, even maybe 100 acre feet. So at least based on historic practice, there's certainly water available, and it's important for, I think, the council to recognize the way this is drafted is by October 1st of every year, CWCB, your entity and the town will get together and say, well, what is the town willing to kind of participate in, or what level this year? And if the answer is we need all our water this year, that's fine. There's no obligation to give water, but that out is in there, right? And so that will be an annual conversation. And that's why I say that it seems to be really no risk there. And so at the 300 acre, my view was contribute some, build in a margin of safety. You never know what's going to happen, right? Weird things seem to be happening more and more often. And I still think at 300 acre feet, there's a pretty substantial margin of safety for the town to make sure it can take care of its municipal water needs.
Thanks for
I
that
think to
color.
go back to your question too, David, the hope is that if we can demonstrate that this works with the town, that we might be able to demonstrate it works with other entities as well. There have been places that have done contract modifications to make these things work, but which is what we thought we'd need to do originally. We're able to do this without, and so as many as we can find that don't need those modifications in their contract to make this work, we'll probably try to go there first. Garfield County's made some changes to their contract to allow water for the 15-mile reach near Grand Junction, and so there's a model for that as well. And but I think our thought is to start here where you don't have to make those changes, doesn't take the time or the cost or the money to do it, and see if we can make it work. The Bureau wanted to be able to show that one worked, and then they'd be willing to consider others, and so we came to you guys first.
Thank you. Other questions or comments?
Well, it's the perfect ask for the 300 acre feet that we purchased 20 years ago or whatever it was, because we weren't sure where it was going to go. We didn't need it at the time, and we also found out that fly fishing was a $7 million industry in the Roaring Fork Valley, and the economics told us to purchase it because it was a good deal. But the fact that it flows through and improves the habitat in the gold medal water right here from the Midland Bridge down is even a bigger draw for our fishing community. And there's more and more guides on the river all the time. You guys probably see that. And it's a big industry in January and February, more than it ever was. So, and the other thing that was cool about it was we were able to convince the Bureau of Rec to time the flows that they released in the summer and spring, so it improved the fishery too. So this is going to add another layer of coordinated ecological benefit, I guess you'd call it, to a pretty good industry that is growing quickly. So I'm all in for that. It's a good purpose.
I think this is great. It sounds like you guys already talked to Carbondale. I'm gonna guess you're gonna go down this list of all the other municipalities down valley. That article's awesome because it does fully break it down. And I'm sure you've talked to April and Ruwapa. I know we've been a part of this in other years. So there is that little bit of, we have a little bit in Ruwapa that I'm sure we lend to it. But do you think, it sounded like it looked on that chart that in the big years of release, it was about 3,500 acre feet, us getting up to almost 10% of that. Do you guys think you'll be able, obviously the ultimate goal is 100%, but your realistic goal is probably 50%, I would guess, or maybe 70%?
Yeah, I think we're kind of trying to see that we can get this one through. Basalt Water Conservancy District is another one we've talked to, and
They seem to have a lot.
yeah, and so I think there's opportunities. I don't know how fast it will all move, and so knowing that the River District is there as a fallback, and I think showing the CWCB that we're doing some due diligence to try to build up this program locally, hopefully is able to keep it running in the interim while we continue to kind of work through this.
Awesome. Well, great work, and I thank you guys for bringing it to our attention because it's super important for the.
I had a couple quick questions. Where are we at in the process and like what's next? So I can figure out what action the council needs to take.
We have a contract drafted that
Right.
both of us have looked at that follows the CWCB's kind of model contract but fits to our circumstances.
Yeah.
So we need to run that back to CWCB, make sure they're good with it. And then I think it's, executing the contract. We need to run it by the division engineer. We've talked to him. I think his concerns, he was as supportive also, and his concern, which is great to have a division engineer that can help be behind something like this. And then we've had significant conversations with Reclamation on how to approach it too. And so we think they'll sign off on it per the contract requirements.
Just a clarifying point, just the contract that the town signs will be with the CWCB, so they need to hold any of that supplemental flow. They would hold all those leases.
Right. And what do you think the timeline is? Because we need to tee up an action for them to approve that water use agreement. What do you think
I don't know.
what is the timeline in working through this with the CWCB?
That I don't think will take too long,
Okay.
probably a month. They probably need to run it through their hoops as well for signature. It may take till their fall meeting, because their July meeting is now.
Right.
So I'm thinking because they have quarterly meetings, right? So
September they have one.
yeah. So
Fall one could be busy with some Shoshone stuff. But,
yeah, right.
yeah.
Lots of things probably.
Right.
But I don't know. I think it should roll along in the next few minutes. So I do you want to tee it up for give us a deadline and we'll.
No, I was going to say what we could do is bring it back at the next council meeting if you guys are comfortable with this direction. Get a resolution teed up to approve the water use agreement. I saw the draft that you guys worked on and had made a couple edits. So I think if council's comfortable with that direction, we'll kind of line up those actions.
Yeah, let's do it so that they have ammo for their next meetings with other towns to say, hey, look, town of Basalt signed on, let's help spur this along,
Yeah,
for
that'd
sure.
be great. And as the chips fall into place, we'll get it signed up. But if we have authority to do it, it just is it's a good message to be able to take it out there.
For sure. Yeah.
Well, it gives a lot of bang for our buck as well. I mean, by
bucks.
my numbers, by doing this as like an in-kind donation, allows us to effectively double what we gave you last time. The value of this water is $20,000 versus, and then we actually saved $10,000.
Right.
So
yeah.
it's a,
We're not hitting you up for,
it's a win-win, yeah, exactly. Keep 10,000 in the bank, but have an in-kind worth 20,000, it's,
yeah, and it's putting that water to work in our rivers
yeah.
that would otherwise not be there.
So about September, it's gonna be worth $100,000. What a, quick question too, on the private water is 7 out of 14 miles or something on the pan. Would there be a outreach to some of those private property owners that have done a lot of river enhancements and bank work and drops and eddies and, you know, I'm thinking.
For funding?
Yeah, and I'm sure they're probably already connected anyway, but this is a good conversation starter for some of those guys up there.
Be great. I'd love to use it tomorrow night.
There we go.
Oh, okay.
Just saying the town feels pretty good about it.
You need a straw poll or something?
There's a conservancy event tomorrow night, so a lot of the regular folks will be there supporting the
Good.
conservancy, and it'll be a good place to talk about it a little bit. But we don't want to talk about it to anybody until we sort of, we're talking to you guys first. We don't want to get out.
Go for it, I say.
Good purchase, Rick.
Yeah, that's why we bought it.
So reservation, or resolution for next meeting sounds great.
Yeah, so we'll bring that back for next meeting.
I have one more question with the, kind of related to all this. I was reading in the Denver Post earlier this week that there was kind of a new updated conceptual framework for the overall Colorado basin and looking at it in terms of, I'm going to probably butcher this, but you know, basically there a realization and a framework that recognizes there's only so much water, so we got to look at things more proportionally. Could that impact any of the rights that we have, our contract rights? I mean, that's a pretty open-ended question. I'm just curious. I wondered about that when I was reading it.
You're the big picture. You're the big picture person. So there's a lot going on. I would defer to her on that. But I mean, we have a perpetual contract for this water, right? We have 2 contracts. It is perpetual. We've paid off the capital amount. We do pay annual OM&R. So whatever happens in the interstate world, I don't see that affecting, you know, our vested water rights or our perpetual contract for Rio Water.
Yeah, and in the bigger picture, my great hope is that there is a consensus between the 7 basin states, and the idea of looking at Colorado River water based on how much flow there is versus kind of numbers that just don't work in the hydrology anymore is a better way. I think it was a breakthrough in discussions.
Yeah.
And I hope that I hope those discussions continue. There's, you know, a lot of pressure on our Colorado River reps to fold their hands a little bit up here in the high country. And they're holding strong, but also I think a consensus agreement is a good way to go. Sitting in courtrooms is just, it would be great legal work from a lawyer, but like, what a waste of money. So,
Yeah.
so.
The deadline's coming up next, again,
Yeah,
next year.
The 2007 guidelines expire at the end of this, end of 2026.
2026.
Yeah, so we have next year, but they go through a NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act project, and there's a lot of public pieces that have to come together for the Department of Interior to then do a finding of no significant impact, or the kind of, you know, record of decision that makes these kinds of things work. So there's a lot of pressure to do it now, so that can all fold out with the support of the 7 basin states versus them all squabbling with each other.
Yeah.
And the harder part is, I think, that the lower basin states, they just get what's released from the dams. Like, you know, the dams are there. Here's your 7.5 million acre feet, and it's there every year. Up here in Colorado, if it's a crappy water year, people's water gets turned off around here. I mean, ditches turn off and Shoshone calls goes on, and we turn down our water use. And so trying to reconcile those 2 types of water management is the trick. So,
Well, thank you for that. That bigger picture context, it's helpful.
yeah, it's in the news every day for sure.
All right.
Well, great,
Thank you very much.
all. We really appreciate it.
Presentation.
Yeah, really good.
Thank you so much. And appreciate him too. He was like, let's do it the easy way.
And David, maybe one more thing before Ramsey leaves. I think everyone should know that she's being recognized by the Roaring Fork Conservancy as the River Conservator of the Year this year at tomorrow night's event. So thanks, Ramsey, for all your work.
It's a pleasure to work with them in our community. So, thanks for all you guys do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. Now we're moving on to council actions. Next up, we have 7A, Resolution Number 28, Series of 2025, which is a resolution of the Town Council of Basalt, Colorado, approving a contract for design build of the Stotts Mill Affordable Housing Development on lots 20 and 21 with Michelle and Catherine.
Yeah. Hi, David and Council. Thanks for having me. Tonight, I'm bringing to you, as you mentioned, a contract for a design build of potentially a next duplex in Stotts Mill. As a reminder, in 2022, we approved the purchase of four lots in Stotts Mill, 4 deed restricted units, and then just last year, we moved forward with the building of an initial duplex, which actually should be receiving its certificate of occupancy this week, if not next week. You know, we've been working with R.A. Nelson and Caddis being the designer and R.A. Nelson the contractor, on a few projects. They did the build out for our Stotts Mill Child Care Center, and they are also building this first duplex. They've been a great partner. They've been delivering both of the projects so far, both below budget and ahead of schedule. So our intent is to move forward with that same team, with the contract we have before you tonight, that we aren't able to kind of exactly duplicate what we've done on lots 15 and 16 to date, due to the architectural the needs of the Architectural Review Committee, just having something slightly different with different roof lines and so on, which requires an analysis by structural engineers and so on to make some tweaks and changes to the design so that it fits within the community out there. But then ultimately we'd come back before you with the overall construction budget that R.I. Nelson would price based on the final design. I'm happy to answer any questions you all have about the build or the design of this next duplex, but as I mentioned, we'd come back before we move forward with the construction contract.
So they've already changed the guidelines from the last time we approved it? From the one that's gonna get, we can't just like
Yeah.
build that exact same unit
No.
because of the HOA?
Yeah, the Architectural Review Committee is very strict. And so what we'll be looking to do is modify it slightly so that it has some differentials, but is not identical.
Oh, because they don't, I get what you're saying.
Right, so the floor plan is likely to be close to identical, just the massing from the outside, whether we tip the roof slightly more, move the porch forward or back, or some details like that. That's what we'll be playing with.
I guess my question is, if we're gonna get the CO on this building, obviously one we're holding on to, preferably for a new town manager if they need that. What, are we putting the other one into the pool right away? Or is there a staff member that's gonna take it?
Yeah, so we are actually working internally on a policy for town staff to have access to these units, and then how it'll roll down if there are no town staff for the units.
Okay.
So that'll be coming back in the next meeting or two.
And my last question is, is it possible to turn that into a quadplex?
No,
No. It has to be
yeah,
duplex, just the way.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wonder if you get too many 3-bedroom units and then you have now we're sitting with.
yeah,
vacant
unfortunately,
3-bedroom.
the PUD doesn't allow for that.
Okay.
Other questions or comments?
Will you come back with the policy, and would it be a sort of an evaluation of the occupancy potential on the next one that we build?
Yeah, we'll
So
be
we
back
don't, we
hopefully with
don't
a,
put $1.6 million out there and it's dedicated to a resource that's in the waterfall and somehow it ends up vacant or not affordable or not subsidized rent-wise.
sure, yeah, we'll be back with the policy at the next meeting. Right now, in the PUD, these lots are restricted to Category 2, which is not very feasible for any units anymore. So we'll be bringing back a recommendation on adjusting that. As far as 3-bedroom units go, the majority of deed-restricted housing in Basalt are 1-bedrooms. So I don't think that there's a concern that they'll be used.
Other questions or comments?
Can we make sure when we're going through this waterfall that it's not specified to the district and more specified to a teacher in the district? Because I feel like that's where we've lost out on the apartments, where something that could have been a really cool asset for a young teacher gets passed on by the district, and if the district doesn't have their stuff together, then, I don't know, just make sure I just want to make sure it gets filled and doesn't, so it serves the purpose we're all dreaming of helping a family live in Basalt and not just have an unintended empty unit.
Mayor, I move that the town council adopt resolution number 28, series of 2025.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Pam, will you please call the roll?
Absolutely. Let's begin with Angela Anderson.
Yes.
Thank you, Angela. Rick Stevens,
Yep.
Angel Dupré-Bouchard,
Yes.
Ryan Slack,
Yes.
David Knight,
Yes.
and Dieter Schindler.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So next up, we have 7B, which is Resolution Number 29, Series of 2025. Resolution of the Town Council of Basalt, Colorado, approving a professional services agreement with GM Shea for design guidelines for the Midland Avenue Business District. We have Michelle and Carlton for this one. Got anybody from GM Shea on, or just you?
Yes, Jessica from Jim Shea is on, and she needs to be promoted here.
Yeah. Get there myself.
Okay, Jessica's on as well.
We can see you as well here, Jessica. Good evening, Council. Just a little bit of background here to remind you guys. Carlton Henry, Planner 2 with the Town of Basalt. We'll be discussing Resolution Number 29, Series of 2025, to enter the town into an agreement with GM Shea Architects. At the May 27th, 2025 Town Council meeting, Town Council rejected a motion to approve a contract between the Town of Basalt and GM Shea Architects to establish design guidelines both for the Midland Avenue Business District and the Residential Hill District. However, at the request of Council, GM Shea and town staff renegotiated the proposed contract, and GM Shea was able to provide an updated scope of work, which excluded the Residential Hill District and has solely included the Midland Avenue Business District for the design guidelines project. We see 2025 as a milestone in the revitalization of the Midland Avenue Business District with the opening of Midland Avenue following extensive civil and design improvements. To further enhance and protect this historic district, staff feels that these design guidelines will help to complete the 2020 master plan goals to continue to protect this district in perpetuity moving forward. Staff would recommend that the establishment and future adoption of these design guidelines be pursued through this contract with GM Shea. And at that, I would open it up to discussion and any questions. The amended packet has been included, or amended proposal has been included as part of your packet, and Jessica is here as well, and I would prefer to defer to her on any questions you may have regarding the design guidelines themselves. Essentially, you're just seeing reduced scope of services. Their actual proposal in regards to what they would be providing for the Midland Avenue Business District has not substantially changed. Price tag has also come down to reflect the reduced scope of work. So.
Sounds good. Questions, comments?
I have a couple. One of the questions that was raised to me a couple days ago was about the deliverables on this. So I looked, and I think it's in the proposal somewhere on the left-hand column there, and I can't remember exactly which page it was. But I think it spoke a little bit to the history of the formation of this historical downtown sort of commission, or whatever it ended up being back when Ann Friedman initiated that. And I thought that was a really important piece to re-anchor as part of this master plan update, or the goal of the master plan was to remind everybody that this has been, in fact, I think in 2001, the Wall Street Journal published an article on the quintessential mountain town of Basalt, and the phone started ringing off the hook here in Town Hall about 5 minutes after that. So it's had a reputation for a long 125 years next year. The other piece of it was about the $16 million investment that was just made out there, and the constructability of a new development as it relates to the space that it's going to be built in. So below grade floor area, below grade space, access to these locations. There's a right of way, I think, off of Homestead that comes down on a very steep grade to the back of some of these buildings. There's virtually no staging area, no site storage area, no parking area. It's going to be a very difficult undertaking to recreate Heather's personality on there in a modern building. So I think that that's sort of got to be stated up front, as if you're going to walk in the door with an urban renewal project, you're into a serious place for new construction. To replace the existing facilities that have been constructed out there in a like manner after it gets disturbed for 100 feet of sidewalk is going to be potentially, and you can see it, you can drive 20 minutes and you can go see what goes on. But nobody's building on this $16 million platform up there. They're building on stuff that's 30 years old. So to go forward, I think it's a pretty big deal and the developer that has to anticipate that going in. And I think the council needs to recognize that it's going to be another level of, like, building around St. Patrick's Cathedral or something in New York City is what it amounts to. So if that's part of what they put in there, that could be included in design guidelines or any other piece of this.
Yep, that sounds exactly like the reason we're doing these. We know that the development pressure is coming from Up Valley, and to maintain our charm and the character, to get those design guidelines set up so that we can keep it similar and within the scale that we have.
I guess my question comes in on, when we went through this before and I was fighting against a design guideline for the Hill District, there was a brief comment made of, well, Midland's pretty protected in a way, but now we're going to still spend $36,000 to just reinforce the protections, to have a more detailed protected, like, don't we already have general guidelines for these districts that people have to follow? Like, if someone came in right now, could they just scrape, let's say, Heather's or Two Rivers Cafe?
There are certain buildings on Midland that are historically designated. Two Rivers, Heather's is historically designated, but there are other buildings on Midland that are not historically designated, and they could be scraped. We have basic zoning parameters, but we don't have a lot in the C2 zone district that talks about, certain elements of character.
I guess I just feel like, and if anything came out of, let's just use it hypothetically, someone comes in to take down Tempranillo.
Yeah. Well, it's historic too.
That's historic. Okay, let's move on to the glass horse building.
Yeah, sure.
Iron Horse?
Yeah, they want to take that building down. They bought them all out and they're gonna strip it down.
Yeah.
They would still have to go through a full development presentation with us. They would still have to, just like we made them change the facade on there, like there's still all these steps. So is this just trying to help the developer just have more parameters and prevent us from being in this position of making choices on what's aesthetically pleasing?
The way I see it is it would make the process less subjective and more objective in that situation, right? And the buildings that aren't historically designated already, we then, when a proposal comes before us, can actually just refer back to all the varying layers. We have the zoning parameters, and then we would have this layer, and it would be much easier to objectively say, no, this does not meet the qualifications.
That's really well put, and that's the reason for bringing in an experienced professional in this space who has experience doing this, not just in communities like ours, but I would say, across the country. And so the hope is that they can come in and set some objective parameters that we can all agree on now, instead of making a spot decision when we have somebody who comes in to develop here and trying to find a way to tell somebody no, right?
Yeah, because I think if hypothetically, if some project comes along, it's that principle, it when you see it, something that doesn't fit the character and of the town, and it comes along and we don't have these guidelines and we have no way to influence or even say no to that and it just comes in and we have to just accept it because we don't have a rubric to kind of judge it by, right?
And the other qualifier in there too is impact, Do we want a 2-year hole in the ground in the middle of Midland Avenue? I mean, no, I don't.
No,
I've had 2 years of that already. So this is a good reminder as to what the town's expectations are for Midland Avenue.
Any other questions or comments? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move that the town council adopt resolution number 29, series of 2025.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Pam, will you please call the roll?
Absolutely. Let's begin with Rick Stevens,
Yes.
Angel Dupré-Bouchard,
Yes.
Ryan Slack,
Yes.
David Knight,
Yes.
Dieter Schindler,
Yes.
Angela Anderson.
Yes.
Thank you, Angela. Motion carries.
Thanks for sticking with us, Jessica.
Thank you. I'm excited.
Thanks, guys. All right, last agenda item here, we have item 7C, which is a first reading of ordinance number 9, series of 2025, an ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Basalt, Colorado, amending the 2025 budget and providing for a supplemental appropriation related to revenues and expenditures. Doug, you've got this one?
Yeah, so thank you. This is short and sweet. We're looking to do is seek appropriation and amend the current year budget to allow for the town to contribute $500,000 to the purchase of the consortium of funding for the mobile home parks. The contribution subject to satisfaction of the town of the conditions of the letter of intent with Sissel, ROC. And I think a lot of the discussion's been around what the deed restrictions would be for the mobile home park. Jeff and I were on a call today regarding the transaction, and there's some legalese here, so I'll defer to Jeff on some of the particulars of it. But basically what we're doing is asking for $500,000 subject to us closing the deal. The original budget, this is all general fund money. Original budget had us being having expenditures in excess of revenue of about $390,000. So this would amend the budget for that then to be $890,000 expenditures in excess of the revenue. I'll likely come back in, I'm going to say probably third meeting in July, first meeting in August, with a budget amendment kind of going through the first half of the year and incorporating another budget amendment that would incorporate perhaps miss that we're going to have on sales tax and some of the other revenues that we're running over on, but we'll have another budget amendment. But for now, keep it simple, it's just $500,000. And I'll defer here to Jeff with more of the transaction.
Yeah, this will just put the town in a position to actually fund the purchase as that moves along. I think they're working through they are working through the contract terms currently, and otherwise we'll be working on a deed restriction, which is kind of what we're getting in exchange for the contribution to the purchase. And so more to come on those issues, and we'll hopefully have more information at the next meeting.
Thank you both. Questions?
Is there going to be any pre-annexation language? Because I can see where 10 years from now, that park could petition to be annexed into the town. It's an enclave on top of that. I think it's surrounded by the town, basically. I don't know if that's worth talking about now or something just put in the pipeline for later, and how we would manage the annexation process with a property that's existing with infrastructure and space and tenants and homeowners. It's different from a real, subdivision.
Yeah, I generally would say any kind of annexation discussions might be a little premature.
Yeah.
I don't think that the town has an immediate interest in doing that, and I haven't heard from that the residents would pursue a petition for annexation, at this time. But it's something to consider, and if that were to occur, certainly we'd engage in some discussions about pre-annexation agreement and so forth.
Yeah, it's come up before on a couple other sites, so I just wonder that are outside of our jurisdiction, but close enough to be interesting to the property owner.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
You have to open this for a public meeting? It's a public meeting?
Not this.
Yeah, the public hearing is on second reading.
Second reading?
Yeah.
Mayor, I move that the town council approve ordinance number 9, series of 2025 on first reading and set the public hearing and second reading for July 22nd, 2025.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Pam, will you please call the roll?
Absolutely. Let's begin with Angèle Dupré-Bouchard,
Yes.
Ryan Slack,
Yes.
David Knight,
Yes.
Dieter Schindler,
Yes.
Angela Anderson,
Yes.
and Rick Stevens.
Yep.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
All right, that concludes our meeting. We are 17 minutes ahead of schedule.
Great job, man.
Nice work, team. All right, so I will adjourn the meeting. Thanks a lot.